Hello everyone, my name is Bradley and this is Sumsub, a channel about how to survive in the online jungle. Now first, I want to ask you a pretty simple question. Have you been to the movies lately? And I'm talking about the whole setup, the big screen, popcorn and surround sound. Well, look, first the pandemic, then the streaming services that became an integral part of our routine seriously reduced the income of Hollywood studios. But I want to talk to you about an income stream of the film industry that is unrelated to the sale of tickets or the sale of films via the internet. I'm actually interested in how financial fraudsters can use the dream factory of Hollywood for financial crimes. And I'll start with fuck. Precisely. I'm going to start the story with a film in which this word was used exactly 569 times. And yet, this didn't prevent the filmmakers from receiving 5 Oscar nominations. Have you guessed which one this was yet? Well, yes, it's The Wolf of Wall Street. Of course, I'm sure that you've heard of this film. The brilliant DiCaprio in the role of a charming fraudster in the director's chair, right? We've all heard of it and watched it. The script was actually based on the autobiography of Jordan Belfort, a New York broker and also money laundering specialist. So, what could go wrong? I mean, the film was a success, right? Worldwide, it brought in about $400 million, despite the fact that it cost the creators only $100 million. But hold on a minute. It turns out that this film cost roughly half of James Cameron's Titanic. And okay, the Titanic was released in 1997 and the dollar was worth more then than it is now, but also in 2013, another film featuring DiCaprio appeared on screens. The Great Gatsby cost the creators only $5 million for, but is filled with a variety of different complex computer effects and also luxurious costumes. So what did the money really go towards in the film adaptation of the memoirs of a financial fraudster? I mean, maybe the drugs in the frame were real, right? Of course not. The drugs in the scenes were fake, but the scammers behind the scenes were real. Let's go back to 2007, where the story of this film first began. No one wanted to invest in the script, and a significant part of it was a vivid description of financial crimes, and the rest of the time was occupied by parties with drugs, naked women, and alcohol. Nobody was interested in this. In 2012, the company Red Granite Pictures found $100 million for filming. This production company was famous for its luxurious office on Sunset Boulevard. It contained unique cinematic artifacts, such as a poster from the premiere of the film Metropolis by Franz Lang, which was in itself worth $1 million. Unfortunately, the company's own successes were not at all impressive. By that time, it had released only one film, Friends with Kids, a simple romantic comedy that grossed just about $13 million at the box office. There was also another film in the works, the crime drama Out of the Furnace, with a budget of $22 million. But that movie flopped at the box office and collected less than $15 million. So how did such an inexperienced company manage to find $100 million for a risky production about the Wolf of Wall Street? Well, it's all about the identity of the founders. Red Granite Pictures was founded by a businessman from Kentucky, Joey McFarland, and the stepson, the Prime Minister of Malaysia, Riza Aziz. Now, they were brought together by another Malay businessman, Joe Low. Low became the key individual in the whole story. He was born into a wealthy family who did business in mining and also alcohol trading. He studied in London, where he made acquaintance with a whole load of influential families, and then he started investing. In particular, he actively participated in the affairs of the Malaysian Sovereign Wealth Fund, or 1MDB. Officially, he was never on the board of directors of 1MDB, but later, American investigators would find evidence that Low was involved in many of the fund's key transactions, and more specifically, the financing of the production company, Red Granite Pictures. Low knew many celebrities throughout the world of show business. He presented Kim Kardashian with a white Ferrari as a wedding gift, right, for instance. He spent more than $8 million on jewelry for the Victoria's Secret model Miranda Kerr, and bought works by Picasso for Leonardo DiCaprio. Low hosted these incredible parties, and he effectively earned the name Asian Gatsby. Doesn't all of this sound a lot like the story of the brilliant wine connoisseur, Rudy Kurniawan, who I spoke about in the video about money laundering via luxury goods? Well, in this case, the fairy tale also didn't last very long. By 2014, the first pieces of evidence were appearing that Low was involved in schemes of embezzlement of significant amounts of money from 1MDB. In 2016, police confiscated the properties of the Asian tycoon and celebrities began returning their expensive gifts. Can you believe that? And soon, Red Granite Pictures was also charged with financial fraud. The production company decided to acknowledge the accusation of the US government and admitted that its activities were illegally financed by the 1MDB funds. Well, this confession cost the company a whopping $60 million in fines, and this was a serious blow to the company's reputation. And since 2017, it hasn't released a single film. However, you need to understand that Lowe laundered relatively small amounts through films. Participating in Red Granite Pictures was a great way to provide access to, say, some of Hollywood's most famous actors and directors, but the main flow of dirty money was through real estate channels. Experts from the Department of Justice have suggested that Lowe took part in the disappearance of at least $2 billion. Every year, more and more evidence of Asian Gatsby's financial crimes materializes. However, we're unlikely to get any answers from him. For many years now, he's been hiding out somewhere in Asia. He's said to have been seen in Macau, China, but the Chinese authorities reject all accusations of harboring Lowe. But anyway, back to dirty filmmaking, because this is what we're focusing on. Very dirty filmmaking. Have you ever heard of the movie Deep Throat? Well, I hope you're at least 18 years old. Otherwise, I'm probably going to have to ask you to watch one of their other videos, maybe the one about how real hackers differ from the ones in movies and TV series, right? There's a link to that one in the video description. It's quite good. But look, if you are over the age of 18, let's continue. Now, the plot of this movie could only take place in New York, and only in the crazy 70s. In those days, the Big Apple was ruled by 5 mafia clans, or families. Surely you're familiar with the movie The Godfather, right? With Marlon Brando and Al Pacino. So, the model for their protagonists were real criminal families, just in the movies they changed their surnames a little. So that's why the real Corleones were called Bonanno. The Gambinos were hiding behind the name Natalia, and the heroes of our story actually had the same name, Colombo, not Cuneo. In 1972, a member of the Colombo clan named Louis Butchie Pereno invested $22,500 in shooting a porn movie. Now, in those days, it was quite a profitable and respectable business to be in. The films were shot on amateur film cameras and played in underground cinemas. Richer Americans could actually order copies of the films and arrange a private viewing. Deep Throat could have remained one of dozens of similar porn films if the impossible hadn't happened. The Colombo family took advantage of the bureaucratic delays and delayed the procedure for assigning age ratings. Thanks to this, Pereno managed to show the film in ordinary commercial cinemas. Its success was overwhelming. Huge queues formed outside the box office, and celebrities were spotted among the first in the audience. For example, actor Jack Nicholson and the author of Breakfast at Tiffany's, Truman Capote. A review of the film appeared even in the very conservative New York Times. The hype was incredible, but it's the film's revenue that's really interesting here. According to the director, Deep Throat earned $600 million at the box office. Now, this can't be anything but alarming. In 1970, about 203 million people lived in the United States. A movie ticket cost about $2.50. Turns out that Deep Throat was watched by every single inhabitant of the country, including babies, young girls, priests, Mormons, and the blind.
Tell me your secret or I kill you.
Despite the fact that, at most, the film was shown in only half of the states, how could such an incredible sum of money be explained? Well, the Colombo family may well have taken advantage of the popularity of the film to legalize their criminal proceeds. It was easy enough to negotiate with the owners of cinemas and sell themselves huge numbers of tickets, right? And then return the money to yourself as the creator of the most profitable movie in history. Of course, this is, impossible to prove after so many years, but the scheme is quite plausible. In the 70s, another fraud scheme related to film production flourished in New York. An aspiring director and screenwriter, Dan Gordon, was involved in a similar story. In 1971, he began filming for the movie Potluck. The budget was about $100,000, which was provided by one of the mafia families, and Gordon shot illegally on the streets of New York. He worked constantly on script edits to meet deadlines and budget restrictions, but this didn't garner much enthusiasm at all among investors. On the contrary, as the filming neared its end, the relationship between the director and the family representatives was only worsening. Gordon couldn't figure out what was going on until he found out the terrible truth. According to accounting documents, a whole $1 million was invested in this film. The Mafia had hoped that the young director would not be able to cope and that the film would be declared as unfinished. Of course, in this case, all of the fake investments would have landed in the pockets of the criminal producers. Gordon was deeply frightened by this discovery and ran away from New York at the first opportunity. He actually served as an officer in the Israeli armed forces for almost 10 years and only actually returned to America in the early 80s. Fortunately, the potluck story had already been forgotten by that time. Gordon eventually returned to screenwriting and actually went down in Hollywood history as the author of Passenger 57, Hurricane, and Rambo: The Last Blood. So, although in this case Dan Gordon did not agree to working for the Mafia, the history of cinema knows the name of a director who was proud of helping companies evade taxes. If you're a fan of computer games such as Alone in the Dark, Postal, or Far Cry, then you probably already know who we're talking about. So, meet the winner of the Golden Raspberry 2009 in the nomination for Worst Director of the Year, Uwe Boll. Unsuccessful films happen to all directors, but only Uwe Boll managed to have such an absolute lack of box office receipts. Let's take a look. Now, in 2003, he shot House of the Dead with a budget of $12 million, but the film barely collected 13. 2 years later, Alone in the Dark is released, which cost, say, 20 million, but collected only half of this amount. In 2007, In the Name of a King, a dungeon siege tale appeared on screens. The budget of this dark fantasy grew to $60 million, and yet it collects just 13 million at the box office. Now, it appears that the budget is growing, and yet revenue remains at the same level. Would you invest your own money in films by such an unsuccessful director? Well, yes you would if you worked in Germany and you were trying to dodge high taxes. The secret here lies in the desire of the German government to create its own film industry. If German companies invested their money in the film industry, then that money wouldn't be taxed whatsoever. Moreover, in the event of a financial failure of the resulting film, the state will compensate for part or all of the funds spent. Now, do you understand how much of a neat scheme this actually turns out to be? Instead of paying your taxes, you invest money in the work of a weak director. He returns a significant part of these funds through your own offshore company, or spends on, say, intangible services of other companies, and with the remaining money, he makes a bad film that flops at the box office, and the state then compensates you for your unsuccessful investments. Now, for you, everything's in the black, but not for the government. In fact, Uwe Boll is not a unique phenomenon in cinema. Hollywood studios have also been taking advantage of the shortcomings of German legislation for years. Do you remember another film adaptation of a game, Tomb Raider, with Angelina Jolie as Lara Croft? Simon West's film cannot be compared to the creations of Uwe Boll, that's for sure. With a production of $94 million and at the box office the film raked in almost $300 million, you can't exactly call it a failure. But Boll's films are combined with tax-exempt funding schemes. American journalist Edward J. Epstein estimated that the direct costs of Paramount for the production of Tomb Raider was only $7 million. So how is that all possible? Well, actually, it's all about tax legislation. Epstein gives the following figures. At first, in order to take advantage of the benefits, the American company sold the film that hadn't actually been shot yet for $94 million to the German company, Tele München Group. The German company immediately signed a counter-lease agreement with the Americans for $83 million. So as you can see, filming hasn't even begun, and Paramount has already acquired more than $10 million.
Oh my God! Wow!
The company actually repeated a similar deal with English partners, although actually in order for that to take effect, it was necessary to shoot, I think, several scenes in the UK, but this saved them a further $12 million. The company compensated for the remaining 65 by pre-selling the rights to rent the future film in countries where the game about Lara was particularly successful. So distributors from Japan, Spain, France, Italy, and of course Germany and England joined the project. That's all. The studio had to find less than $10 million to shoot a blockbuster based on a popular game with one of Hollywood's biggest stars in the title role. This is really a win-win situation. Of course, such a tax haven could not last too long. At first, the German government blocked benefits to foreign companies, and then it came to Uwe Boll's German colleagues. The maestro of appalling film adaptations himself stopped making films in 2016. They say that he tried to produce other people's work, but he quickly got tired of it. Now, Boll is enjoying a well-earned rest. According to the net worth portal, his wealth is estimated at $10 million. Not bad at all for a man who hasn't made a single profitable movie in his lifetime. I think think it would be pretty naive to think that government officials and AML specialists are not aware of all of these stories. The names of Uwe Boll, Louis Pereno, and Joe Lowe are very familiar to any expert in the sphere of combating financial fraud. But this doesn't mean that scammers are idly sitting about. They're constantly looking for more and more schemes to legalize criminal proceeds. If you type in the search bar the phrase Bollywood money laundering, you'll find some interesting and sometimes outright frightening schemes that are used in Indian cinema. Hollywood accounting is an already well-established term that describes complex and opaque schemes for reducing taxes, recalculating profits, and inflating expenses. And thanks to the ability of financial consultants, unprofitable films can bring their creators very good money, and leading pictures the opposite. As a kid, I loved Harry Potter. I mean, who didn't, right? My favourite movie was actually Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. But can you imagine how surprised I was when, in search of material for today's video, I came across this document. Now, if this is true, then the film, which grossed almost $1 billion, bought Warner Brothers losses of $167 million. To be honest, I really don't want to believe in such a scheme. After all, I'd love to see real magic in Hollywood movies and not tax evasion schemes.
This is a lie.
It's not a lie, I saw it.
But I would like to draw your attention to another issue. What do you think? Which branch of the economy in the coming years may be the locomotive of money laundering? In which industry are unrealistic investments concentrated and the human factor becomes critically important? Where can one person's mistake cost hundreds of millions of dollars? Of course, this is IT, but in my opinion, the market situation has changed significantly in the recent years. The recent collapse of Theranos, the scandals with Google and Meta make fraud in high-tech companies not so easy as one would first believe. Regulatory and tax authorities keep too much of a close eye on them. But there is a sub-sector of IT that has budgets comparable to Hollywood film studios, but at the same time doesn't feel the pressure of inspection bodies. I'm talking about the development of computer games.
Then boom! Careful, go!
Translating into common, someone fucking made off with nearly 20 tons of my gold, and all the lighter stuff, and you.
You can be the judge, right? The budget of CyberPunk 2077 was $314 million.
Wake the fuck up, samurai. We have a city to burn.
Now, this is a number comparable to blockbusters such as Avengers Infinity War or Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End. The game failed massively at its launch and subsequently bought down CD Projekt Red shares and received only 68 on Metacritic. So what? Did a huge scandal break out, followed by an investigation of financial activities or mass complaints from investors? No. It's just that something didn't work out for Polish programmers. Things happen. Similar stories actually happened with GTA, the trilogy Definite Edition.
No money, no funny bunny, honey.
Anthem and Bloodlines 2, and even Battlefield 2042. Don't you think that game developers would face a whole wave of high-profile financial revelations in the coming years? I'd like to be wrong, but for some reason the situation in game dev reminds me more and more of that sort of tax fraud-riddled history of Hollywood. Well anyway, my name is Bradley, and thanks for tripping with me on this teeny tiny topical and tropical telephonetic tender-hearted trial through the tantalizing, fantasizing and tense twigscapes of the online jungle. I'll see you in the next video.